Our prayer this morning is by Stephen Schick, entitled Entwined. Spirit of life, God of love, I am entwined in your delicate web of mutuality. The life energy that makes me reach for the sun also moves me to become wrapped like the strong bittersweet vine and the delicate sweet pea around those I meet and love. Here in the tangle of my daily life, I feel your pulse and sense what it means to be alive. Here, twisted and knotted, I thrive, seeking the light that will pull from me the fragrant blossom of love. Spirit of life, help me to experience the beauty of your interwoven and intricate web, that I may always embrace without reserve all those whom my life touches. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Margaret Wheatley. I've shared it before here, and it is called Turning to One Another. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Ask what's possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everybody who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. Rely on human goodness. Stay together. So last week I was lucky enough to spend the week in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. It was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of trip. And of course, because it is me and I have a vacation curse, it did rain most of the days that we were there. But nevertheless, we had enough good weather that we could explore the island and gain an appreciation for how special a place it is. My friend Liz is a Presbyterian minister in Kailua, a town on the east side of Oahu, and we stayed with her and her husband Jason and their one-year-old son Oliver for part of our trip. I was excited to go to her church on Sunday and experience her leading worship live and in person, since I usually tune into their services online. We have a sort of online worship trade going on midweek. Liz met us on our first day with fresh floral leis, which she hung around our necks in the traditional Hawaiian welcome. It was a fabulous gift. But before I even left for Hawaii, Liz had also given me a gift which shaped my time there. One day, a few months ago, I received a surprise package in the mail, a book she had sent me called Unfamiliar Fishes by Sarah Vowell. Unfamiliar Fishes is an exploration of Hawaiian history, and especially the Americanization of Hawaii. From the arrival of the New England missionaries in 1820 to the events leading up to the imprisonment of the last Hawaiian queen, we were able to see that room, and the American annexation, the book covers a lot of ground. It's easy to get carried away by the gorgeous scenery and tropical paradise of the Hawaiian Islands. That aloha spirit is everywhere. But I found it to be a much richer experience if you know some of the history behind the islands. Not just Pearl Harbor, which we all know about, but long before that. The history of Hawaii is deep and heartbreaking and extremely complex, and it has a lot to teach us. What I've been thinking about since reading the book and spending some time on Oahu for the first time is the difference between the call to go out into the world to preach and convert, found in the book of Acts in the Bible, and the call to go out into the world and taste everything, as in the Hawaiian specialty called plate lunch. Now, all the credit for taking the entire history of Hawaii and picking out these two threads goes to Sarah Bell, by the way. But I've been so intrigued by these two themes that I wanted to share them with you. So first, the book of Acts. If I had to pick one Bible verse that students of American history should know, Bell says, it's Acts 16:9. And a vision appeared to Paul in the night. There stood a man of Macedonia and prayed him, saying, "Come over into Macedonia and help us." Here's how Sarah paraphrases it. In the middle of his second missionary journey, the Apostle Paul had a dream or a hallucination, we don't know, in which a Macedonian stranger pleaded for his preaching. Paul dropped what he was doing in Asia Minor and immediately sailed across the Aegean. For Americans, Acts 16:9 is the high fructose corn syrup of Bible verses, she says. It's an all-purpose ingredient that will stir into everything, from the ink on the Marshall Plan to canisters of Agent Orange. Our greatest goodness and our worst impulses come out of this missionary zeal, she says, contributing to our overbearing, yet not entirely unwarranted sense of our country as an inherently helpful force in the world. And as with the Apostle Paul, the notion that strangers want our help is sometimes a delusion. Now, many of us Unitarians are not very biblically literate, so we may not have been able to quote Acts chapter and verse, but we can recognize the truth that this scripture has shaped much of our American history. The forerunners of the New England missionaries, the Massachusetts Bay colonists, scrawled Acts 16:9 across their colony's first official seal, in which an Indian literally says, "Come over and help us." Much like with the Native Americans, the missionaries and later white settlers in Hawaii brought and spread their ideas and their religion, but also their diseases, their formality, their obsession with farming and land ownership. They influenced and changed Hawaii irrevocably. I mean, the missionaries did bring some good things with them, too. They wanted to preach the Bible to native Hawaiians, and they believed, like all good Reformation Protestants, that each person should be able to read the Bible for themselves. But there was no written language for Hawaiian then, so they helped to create one. And then they taught everyone they could to read. From the first page printed in the Hawaiian Islands in 1822 to the end of the missionary operations in 1863, the Hawaiian people accomplished an absolutely incredible educational feat. They went from having no written language on the islands to 75% of all Hawaiians learning to read and write their native language. And that made Hawaii one of the most literate nations on the planet. The missionaries also convinced Hawaiians that it was acceptable for men and women to eat together and for women to eat bananas. So that was previously forbidden. I guess Acts 16:9 isn't all bad. How do we get from Acts to plate lunch? You may be asking this question. Well, if the missionaries' main objective was to save souls, their children and grandchildren's main objective was to make money. The native Hawaiians had no sense of individual land ownership. Their connection to the land was much more spiritual than that. And their sense of community and communal ownership far outweighed their dedication to personal gain and personal wealth. But the missionaries and their children and grandchildren introduced not just Christianity, but their other religion, capitalism. They brought private land ownership and mass agriculture to Hawaii. And in part, this is what led to plate lunch. You see, the intriguing racial makeup of Hawaii, where every ethnicity is a minority, is due in part to the sugar plantations started by the offspring of the missionaries. To staff these enormous agricultural undertakings, large numbers of laborers were recruited from China, Japan, Portugal, Korea, and the Philippines, changing Hawaii forever. In 1876, Hawaiians comprised nearly 90% of the population. But by 1900, that was down to just 26%, making Hawaiians a minority in Hawaii. Asians were now 57% of the population. And we learned at the Pearl Harbor Museum that when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor during World War II, Oahu was 40% Japanese American. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to the turn of the century. Plantation owners deliberately recruited an ethnically diverse workforce, hoping that the language barriers would prevent laborers from organizing. One plantation manager advised, keep a variety of laborers, that is, different nationalities, and thus prevent any concerted action in case of strikes, for there are few, if any, cases of Japanese, Chinese, and Portuguese entering into strikes as a unit. That still works today, by the way. We live in silos, only talk to people who are like us, so we're easy to control. We learn to fear one another instead of work together toward common goals. We don't work with them because they are black, gay, conservative, poor. When I was driving up to Oahu's North Shore, where the really great surfing is, I wasn't surfing, I was watching the surfing. I saw several homemade signs that caught my eye. One said, "Keep the country country." You see, the North Shore is the last undeveloped part of the island. Waikiki is all hotels and resorts and high-end fashion boutiques now. Kailua, where my friend's church is, has every store imaginable, including a Whole Foods. But the North Shore, is farms and jungle and beaches. There are only 2 hotels up there. So of course, the great-great-great-grandchildren of the missionaries want to develop it, build some resorts up there. Hence the efforts to keep the country. But another sign said, "One struggle, one fight, people unite." It's today's version of ignoring the plantation owner's instructions to keep to our own kind. Gaylord Kubota is a Hawaiian whose paternal grandfather emigrated from Japan in 1900 at the age of 16 to work for the Honolulu Sugar Company. Today, Kubota is the director of the Sugar Museum on Maui. He spends his days researching his grandfather's life and sharing that history with others. They were deliberately segregated, he explains, but most laborers preferred it that way. It's natural, he says, that you're more comfortable with people from your own culture, speaking your own language, having your own customs, and sharing your own foods. That's part of Hawaii's heritage. These cultures were maintained in these camps, but they eventually started cross-fertilizing one another to the point where they blended. One place this happened was the schools. Remember how those missionaries insisted that everyone learn to read? Well, in the public schools, the kids of the original immigrants would mix with each other and play together, and they started learning about each other's cultures. Our own Provincetown school is like that too. A few years ago, I remember that every student in the 8th grade was from a different country. And the other place that this mixing happened was at the lunch table. All of the workers would take their lunch break at the same time, and they each had food from their own culture, and they would share. They'd put it in the middle, and everyone would take a little bit. Soon, everyone was tasting a little bit from everyone else's lunch. A little Japanese-style rice, some Kahlua pig, teriyaki beef, Chinese noodles, Korean spare ribs, and Portuguese bread, even some macaroni salad, all on the same plate. And that habit of hodgepodge got passed down, evolving into the plate lunch now served at diners, drive-ins, and lunch trucks throughout Hawaii. In 1961, the late Seiju Ifuku established the Rainbow Drive-In, the restaurant on the edge of Waikiki that's now famous for its plate lunch. Ifuki had been an army cook with the 100th Infantry Battalion, and that was the mostly Hawaiian-born Japanese-American volunteer soldier unit. And that combat team served as segregated troops during World War II, and they became the most decorated unit in U.S. military history, earning the nickname the Purple Heart Battalion. And their motto was, "Remember Pearl Harbor." Their argument was that they were Americans, not, as the U.S. government classified them and their families, enemy aliens. Vowell writes, Rainbow Drive-In's menu, offering teriyaki, hot dogs, mahi-mahi, and Portuguese sausage, reads like a list of what America is supposed to be like. A neighborly mishmash. Barack Obama, she says, the Honolulu-born president, mentioned once on a trip home his craving for plate lunch, listing the Rainbow Drive-In as a possible stop. It makes sense considering that his Kansan mother met his Kenyan father at the University of Hawaii, and his mother's remarriage blessed him with a half-Indonesian sister. He is, Sarah says, our first plate lunch president. So, missionize or share, Acts 16:9, or plate lunch. It's two very different ways of approaching the world, of approaching other people. One is with certainty, the other is curiosity. One is with the idea of saving others, and one is with the idea of the saving grace of friendship and expanded worldview. This choice was one that explorers and missionaries were making in the 1800s on the Hawaiian Islands, but it's also a choice that we are asked to make today. Often the only time we interact with people who are very different than ourselves, we are volunteering or offering charity. We see ourselves as the ones helping others. But what if it was more of an equal exchange? What if when we encounter others who are quite different from us, we are learning, trading, sharing? What if we're each heaping our life experiences onto a metaphorical plate, serving up Hawaiian-style plate lunch of our lives? Here in the tangle of my daily life, I feel your pulse and sense what it means to be alive. Here, twisted and knotted, I thrive, seeking the light that will pull from me the fragrant blossom of love. When I read the title of the book, Unfamiliar Fishes, I thought it was going to be about the beautiful tropical fish that you can see in Hawaii that we don't have here in New England. But that's not what it refers to at all. You see, the unfamiliar fishes are actually us, the overprivileged Americans. The title phrase comes from a letter written by David Mallow, a native Hawaiian historian in the mid-1800s. He wrote, "If a big wave comes in, large and unfamiliar fishes will come from the dark ocean, and when they see the small fishes of the shallows, they will eat them up. The white man's ships have arrived with clever men from the big countries. They know our people are few in number and our country is small. They will devour us." This happened. But it doesn't have to keep happening every time people with more money or more education or more privilege or more traveling experience meet people with different life experiences. It can be different. We can be different. We can recognize and value the bittersweet vine that entangles all of us, that pulls from us a love deeper and stronger than we could ever know in our comfortable, isolated silos. There is no greater power than a community discovering what it cares about. Ask what's possible, not what's wrong. Keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dreams. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everybody who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. Rely on human goodness. Stay together. Sounds good to me. Amen, and blessed be.